The city looked beautiful from far away. Lights shined in tall buildings, cars rushed on the roads, and people seemed busy living their lives. But not every corner of the city was filled with comfort and happiness. On the other side, where broken houses leaned against each other and the streets were filled with cracks, lived a little girl named Tasha. She was only 12 years old, but her small shoulders carried the weight of struggles many grown people never faced. Tasha's days were long and uncertain. She woke up each morning on an old couch that someone had thrown away long ago, in a small room she shared with 2 other children from the neighborhood. The room was not hers, but the kind family that lived there allowed her to sleep inside sometimes when the nights were too cold. Most of the time, however, she had no guarantee of shelter. She would walk the streets, looking for a safe corner to close her eyes. Her mother had passed away when she was very young, and her father was never around. No one really knew where he went. Some neighbors whispered that he moved to another state, others said he simply disappeared. All Tasha knew was that she had to figure out life on her own. She learned quickly how to find small ways to survive, asking for food at the corner store, picking up bottles to sell for coins, and sometimes helping people carry groceries in exchange for a piece of bread. But nights were the hardest. When the sun went down and the air grew colder, her small heart filled with worry. Where would she sleep tonight? Would she be safe? Some nights she tried to rest on park benches, pulling her thin jacket over her head to hide. Other nights she sat awake on the steps of a church, waiting for the morning. Tasha often dreamed of what it would be like to have her own bed. A bed with soft pillows, warm blankets, and a roof that kept out the rain. She sometimes pressed her face against the windows of houses she passed by, watching families eat dinner together, hearing laughter echoing through the walls. She would imagine herself sitting at the table, smiling, with someone asking her, "Do you want more?" The thought always warmed her heart for a moment before reality returned. One chilly evening, as Tasha walked through the richer part of the city, she noticed how different it was. The streets here were clean, the houses stood tall with shining windows, and gardens were filled with flowers that seemed to glow even in the dark. She walked slowly, her eyes wide, taking in every detail. It felt like stepping into another world. That's when she noticed the biggest house on the street, a mansion with white walls, bright lights, and a gate so tall it seemed to touch the sky. The yard was wide and neatly cut, and she could see a fountain sparkling in the middle. It looked like something out of a dream. She stopped walking and stood at the gate for a long moment, staring. Her stomach growled, and she shivered as the cold wind brushed against her thin clothes. She didn't want to keep walking, but she also knew she didn't belong here. Just as she was about to turn away, she noticed something by the side of the mansion, a large doghouse. It was bigger than most sheds she had seen in her neighborhood. The roof was strong, the walls looked firm, and soft blankets were inside for the dog that lived there. A strange thought crossed her mind. If only I could sleep there. Even the dog here lives better than me. Her little hands tightened around the strap of her old bag as she thought about it. The doghouse looked warmer and safer than any corner she had tried before. She took a step closer, then another. Finally, with a pounding heart, she walked up to the front door of the mansion. It was the bravest and scariest thing she had ever done. She had no idea who lived inside, but she had heard stories. People in her neighborhood often spoke about the owner of this house, a millionaire named Mr. Donovan. He was known for his business success, for his cars, and for the big parties he sometimes held. To Tasha, he seemed like someone from another planet, someone she could never meet in real life. But tonight, she didn't think about his money or his power. She only thought about the doghouse. She raised her small hand and knocked gently on the giant wooden door. At first, there was no sound. Her heart sank, and she almost ran away. But then, footsteps echoed from inside. The door slowly opened, and a woman wearing a neat uniform looked down at her. The woman's eyes showed surprise. She was used to delivery people, guests, and workers, but not a little girl standing alone at night. Yes? Can I help you? She asked, her voice careful but curious. Tasha swallowed hard. She felt her throat tighten, but she forced the words out. Please, can I sleep in the doghouse? Just for tonight. The woman blinked, unable to believe what she had heard. A child asking to sleep in a doghouse, it was something she had never imagined. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Her eyes softened as she looked at Tasha's thin frame, the tiredness in her eyes, and the way she hugged her bag tightly like it was her only treasure. Tasha stood there silently, her heart beating faster, afraid the woman would close the door on her. She didn't dare ask for food, she didn't dare ask for a bed. All she wanted was a safe place to close her eyes, even if it was next to a dog. Inside the house, the sound of laughter and soft music floated through the hallways. It was warm, safe, and filled with comfort. Outside, a little girl waited, shivering under the cold night sky, hoping someone would listen to her unusual request. What she didn't know was that the woman had already decided she couldn't make this choice alone. She quietly called for the master of the house. Moments later, footsteps echoed again, heavier this time. And soon, the door opened wider, and the millionaire himself stepped forward to see who was asking for a place in his doghouse. The door opened wider, and Mr. Donovan himself appeared. He was a tall man with neatly combed hair, dressed in a comfortable evening suit. His face showed both authority and kindness, the kind of face people recognized from newspapers and television. He was used to being in control of everything, used to people asking him for business deals, charity donations, or favors. But never in his life had he heard someone ask the question he was about to hear. At first, he didn't notice Tasha clearly because the light behind him was bright and the night outside was dark. But as his eyes adjusted, he saw her small figure standing timidly at the door. Her jacket was too thin for the cold, her shoes were worn, and her little hands looked rough from hardship. She stood like someone who was both afraid and hopeful at the same time. Mr. Donovan raised his eyebrows slightly. "What's going on?" he asked the housekeeper who stood nearby. The woman hesitated, unsure how to explain. Finally, she said softly, "Sir, she says she wants to sleep in the doghouse tonight." The words felt strange even as she spoke them. Mr. Donovan looked at Tasha directly, his eyes searching her face for answers. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice calm but curious. Tasha nodded quickly, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Please, sir. I don't need food or anything else. I just want a safe place to sleep. The doghouse looks warm. I promise I won't cause trouble." For a long moment, silence filled the space between them. Mr. Donovan had faced many surprising moments in his life, risky investments, sudden losses, big wins, but nothing quite compared to the shock of hearing a child beg to sleep in a doghouse. His heart tightened in his chest. Most millionaires in his position might have laughed, dismissed the girl, or asked security to remove her. That would have been the simple response. But something about Tasha's eyes made him pause. They carried a story of nights without shelter, of hunger, of quiet bravery. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so it would not sound harsh. "Why the doghouse?" he asked gently. Tasha looked down, clutching the strap of her bag as though it held her life inside. "Because it looks better than anywhere else I've slept," she said softly. "It looks safe. Even the dog has blankets. I won't touch anything. I just need to rest." Her words struck Mr. Donovan deeply. Here he was, living in a mansion so large that half the rooms were empty, yet a little girl stood outside begging to sleep where his pets slept. It was a picture of the world's unfairness that he could not ignore. Behind him, two members of his security team shifted uncomfortably. One of them whispered, "Sir, maybe we should not let her stay. We don't know her background." The other added, "It could be risky. She might be pretending," but before they could finish, Mr. Donovan raised his hand to silence them. He was not looking at them, his eyes stayed on Tasha, who now looked as if she was about to cry from fear that she would be turned away. "Come inside," he said suddenly, his voice firm yet kind. Tasha's head lifted in shock. She had not expected those words. She thought perhaps he would let her stay near the gate, or maybe give her a blanket, but the invitation to step inside the grand house was beyond her imagination. She hesitated, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Inside?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes," he replied with a small nod. "It's too cold out here. No child should be asking to sleep in a doghouse. You will rest inside tonight." The housekeeper opened the door wider, and the warm air from the mansion flowed out. Tasha stepped forward slowly, her heart beating fast as she crossed the threshold. She felt as though she had entered another world. The floor beneath her was polished and shiny, the walls were decorated with paintings, and soft lights filled the space. It smelled of fresh flowers and warm food. She stood frozen near the doorway, afraid to walk further, afraid to touch anything. She looked down at her shoes, which left faint marks on the spotless floor, and quickly pulled her feet closer together. Mr. Donovan noticed her nervousness. "Don't be afraid," he said gently. "You are safe here." He guided her to the living room where a fire crackled in the fireplace. The warmth made her shiver as her body adjusted. For the first time in many nights, she felt comfort slowly returning to her. The staff exchanged looks of surprise, unsure of what to make of the scene. Their employer was known for being strict in business, yet here he was showing unusual softness toward a stranger. Mr. Donovan asked the cook to bring a small plate of food. At first, Tasha shook her head quickly. "No, sir, I didn't come for food. I only wanted a place to sleep," she insisted. But he smiled slightly and said, "Eating does not make you a burden. Everyone needs strength. Tonight, you will eat." Reluctantly, she accepted. When the plate arrived, bread, soup, and a little fruit, she held it carefully, as though it were treasure. She ate slowly at first, worried that eating too quickly would seem rude. Every bite warmed her from the inside. As she ate, Mr. Donovan sat nearby, quietly watching. He didn't see her as a nuisance. He saw courage, a child who, despite everything, still had the boldness to knock on a door and ask for what she needed. Most adults would never have dared. Finally, he asked softly, "What is your name?" "Tasha," she answered. "And how old are you, Tasha?" 12, she whispered, lowering her eyes. He nodded, thinking carefully. The weight of her situation began to sink deeper into his heart. At that age, a child should be in school, playing with friends, worrying only about homework and games. Not about where to sleep at night. "Do you have family nearby?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. My mother is gone. My father, I don't know where he is." She stopped there, not wanting to say more. Mr. Donovan leaned back, taking in her words. His mind filled with questions, but he knew not to push too hard. For now, the important thing was that she was safe, warm, and fed. The staff whispered quietly among themselves, astonished by what was unfolding. A millionaire bringing a poor child into his mansion was something no one expected. Outside, the world continued as usual, unaware that a simple act of kindness was taking place inside those tall walls. Tasha finished her meal and sat quietly, her eyes heavy with sleep. She tried to stay awake, afraid that if she closed her eyes she might wake up and find it was all a dream. But Mr. Donovan noticed her struggle. "Come," he said gently, standing. "We will prepare a proper bed for you tonight." Her eyes widened. "A real bed?" she asked, almost in disbelief. "Yes," he replied. "Not the doghouse. A bed, just as you deserve." Her small lips curved into the faintest smile. It was the first time in a long while that she had felt hope rising inside her. She followed him and the housekeeper up the staircase, her footsteps light but her heart heavy with emotions she could not describe. That night, Tasha lay down on a soft mattress with a blanket wrapped around her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe enough to close her eyes without fear. And as she drifted into sleep, Mr. Donovan stood quietly at the doorway, realizing that this little encounter had already begun to change something inside him. The sun rose gently through the tall curtains of the mansion, sending soft golden light into the guest room where Tasha slept. She stirred slowly, her eyes blinking open. For a moment, she was confused. The ceiling above her was high, painted white, and decorated with lights that looked like little stars. The bed beneath her was soft, the blanket warm, and the air smelled faintly of flowers. It felt too perfect, too safe. She sat up quickly, afraid that maybe she had dreamed it all. But then she noticed the neat folded clothes left on the chair by her bed. They were simple but clean and new. She touched them carefully, her heart racing. This was not a dream. The memory of the night before rushed back to her: the mansion, the food, the kind man who had let her in when all she asked for was a doghouse. Her lips curved into a small smile. For the first time in years, she had slept without fear. Downstairs, Mr. Donovan was already awake. He sat at a large dining table, reading the morning newspaper. He had business meetings scheduled for later, but his thoughts kept drifting upstairs. The image of that little girl at his door had stayed with him through the night. He had tossed and turned, wondering what had led her to such desperation. He was a man who often gave money to charities, wrote checks for children's hospitals, and attended galas for social causes. Yet, none of those grand acts felt as real or as personal as opening his door to Tasha. When Tasha finally came downstairs, she looked shy and uncertain. The new clothes fit her, though she walked carefully, as if she didn't want to wrinkle them. She clutched her old bag close to her chest, the only thing she had carried from her old life. The housekeeper smiled gently at her. "Good morning," she said. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, ma'am," Tasha replied softly. Her voice was polite, filled with gratitude. Mr. Donovan folded his newspaper and looked at her with a calm expression. "Come, have some breakfast," he said. She froze for a moment. Breakfast? In this house? She wasn't sure if she should accept. But when he gestured kindly, she nodded and sat carefully at the edge of a chair. A plate was placed before her: eggs, toast, and a glass of milk. She whispered a small thank you before eating. As she ate slowly, Mr. Donovan asked her simple questions. "Where do you usually stay? Do you go to school? Do you have friends nearby?" At first, Tasha answered with short replies. She wasn't used to people asking about her life. Most people hurried past her, too busy to notice. But the warmth in his voice encouraged her to open up little by little. She told him about her mother who had passed when she was very young, about her father who disappeared, about the nights she slept on benches or church steps. She explained how she sometimes collected bottles to sell or helped strangers carry groceries to earn a little money. She did not complain. She told her story simply, as if these struggles were just normal parts of her world. But Mr. Donovan felt his chest tighten with every detail. He could not imagine his own childhood filled with such hardship. "You are very brave," he told her gently. Tasha lowered her eyes, unsure how to respond. No one had ever called her brave before. Later that morning, Mr. Donovan had to leave for a short meeting. But he gave clear instructions to his staff. "Take care of her. Make sure she feels safe." When he returned hours later, he found Tasha sitting quietly in the library, staring at the rows of books. Her eyes were wide with wonder. She had never seen so many books in one place. She traced her fingers along the spines, whispering the titles softly to herself. "Do you like to read?" Mr. Donovan asked from the doorway. She turned, startled, then nodded shyly. "Yes, sir. But I don't have books." Sometimes I look at old magazines from the trash. He smiled faintly. Then you will read as many as you want here. Her face lit up. That simple promise felt like magic to her. That evening, after dinner, Mr. Donovan sat in his study. He thought deeply about the situation. His staff had been cautious all day, reminding him that keeping a stranger in the house could be risky. But he could not ignore the truth. This was not just any stranger. This was a child who had asked only for the bare minimum, a doghouse. That humility, that desperation, had touched something deep in his heart. Still, he felt conflicted. He had built his entire life on caution, careful decisions, and protecting what he owned. But here he was, letting someone into his home based only on instinct and compassion. Was he making the right choice? Would others understand, or would they criticize him? That night, as he walked past the guest room where Tasha was already asleep, he paused. Through the crack of the door, he saw her curled under the blanket, her face peaceful. He realized that whatever doubts he had, the sight of her sleeping safely was worth more than the opinions of others. The next morning, the questions grew stronger. Neighbors had already noticed a young girl entering the mansion. Whispers spread quickly in wealthy circles. People were curious who was she, and why was she staying in the house of one of the city's richest men. Some assumed she was a distant relative. Others thought she might be the child of a friend. But when one of the staff quietly revealed the truth that she was a poor girl who had asked to sleep in the doghouse, the story began to spread. Mr. Donovan didn't mind the curiosity, but he knew that soon, more people would ask questions directly. For now, though, he chose to focus on the girl who sat at his dining table, slowly becoming less afraid each day. Over the next few days, Tasha's presence began to change the rhythm of the mansion. She helped the staff with small tasks, carrying folded laundry, setting the table, or watering the plants. She asked questions about everything she saw: how the dishwasher worked, why the clocks chimed, what certain words in the books meant. Her eagerness to learn filled the house with a kind of energy it hadn't known before. The staff, who at first were unsure, began to soften. They noticed how polite she was, how grateful for every small thing. She never demanded, never complained. Even the guards who had first warned against letting her stay began to smile when she greeted them with cheerful words. But behind all this change, Mr. Donovan still felt the weight of a bigger question. What would happen to her next? Was it enough to give her food and shelter for a few nights? Or did he have a greater responsibility now that fate had brought her to his door? One evening, he sat in the living room, staring at the fire. Tasha sat nearby, reading aloud from a children's book she had found in the library. Her voice was soft, but each word carried effort and determination. She wanted to prove she could learn. When she finished the story, she looked up at him and asked quietly, "Sir, can I stay here for a little while? Just until I can figure out what to do next?" Her question was gentle, almost fearful, as if she already expected him to say no. Mr. Donovan leaned back in his chair, his heart heavy. He had not yet decided, but he knew this moment would shape both of their lives. He looked at her small, hopeful face and realized the choice before him was no longer about risk or reputation. It was about doing what was right. The mansion, once just a symbol of wealth and success, now held a new meaning. And as he looked at Tasha, he felt the beginning of a bond that was stronger than anything he had expected. The days turned into weeks, and Tasha slowly began to feel that the mansion was more than just a place where she had been given temporary shelter. It felt like a new world, a world where doors opened instead of closing, where meals were ready at the table, and where her nights were not filled with fear but with rest. She began to laugh again, something she had almost forgotten how to do. The sound of her laughter filled the hallways, surprising even the staff who had once doubted her presence. But for Mr. Donovan, the situation brought new thoughts each day. He had promised her safety for now, but he knew her life needed more than comfort. She needed education, guidance, and a chance to build a future. He wondered if he could provide that for her or if someone else should. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that sending her away would feel like abandoning her. Fate had placed her at his door for a reason, and he couldn't ignore that. One morning, Mr. Donovan invited Tasha to sit with him in his study. The room was filled with books, maps, and old photographs of his travels. He leaned forward, his hands folded. "Tasha," he began gently, "do you want to go to school?" Her eyes widened. She hesitated, as if afraid to hope too much. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "I've always wanted to. But," she paused, looking down at her hands. "I never had the chance. People said school costs money, and I didn't even have clothes for it." He nodded slowly. "What if I told you that you could go to school now? That you could have books, uniforms, and everything you need?" Her mouth opened slightly, her eyes filling with light. "Really? Really," he assured her. "But it will take work. You'll have to study, listen to your teachers, and give it your best effort." She nodded quickly, her voice firm with determination. "I'll do it, sir. I'll do everything." That very week, arrangements were made. Mr. Donovan used his connections to secure her admission to a good school nearby. The day she tried on her school uniform for the first time, she stood in front of the mirror for a long time, hardly recognizing herself. She looked like any other student, not like a girl who once begged to sleep in a doghouse. On her first day, Mr. Donovan personally dropped her off. As she walked through the school gates, carrying a new bag with books inside, she felt a mixture of fear and excitement. Some children stared, curious about the new girl. Tasha held her head high, remembering Mr. Donovan's words the night before, "Walk in with courage. You belong there just as much as anyone else." At school, she faced challenges. Some students were friendly, others were not. A few whispered about her past when they found out she wasn't from a wealthy family. But Tasha refused to let their words break her. She focused on her lessons, eager to prove that she could learn and grow. Every afternoon, she returned to the mansion with stories of what she had learned: multiplication tables, science experiments, new words in her reading books. She would sit in the library, showing Mr. Donovan her notebooks, and he would listen with genuine pride. Slowly, the bond between them grew stronger. He was no longer just a wealthy man who had helped her once. He became a mentor, a guide, almost like the father figure she had never known. And for him, she became more than a child he had rescued. She was a reminder that compassion could change a life, and in return, that life could change his own. But not everyone understood. Some of Mr. Donovan's business partners questioned his decision. At dinners and meetings, they would bring it up cautiously. "You really let a street child live in your home?" one man asked with raised eyebrows. "It's a risky move. What if people think you've lost focus?" Another said, "Charity is one thing, but taking someone in, it's unusual. It might bring unwanted attention." Mr. Donovan listened but didn't argue. He had always cared little about gossip. What mattered to him was the truth he saw every day: a child who once had nothing now had hope because he chose kindness over caution. The whispers outside didn't stop. Some neighbors speculated about Tasha's story. The staff heard rumors in the market. People were curious about why a millionaire would go to such lengths for a girl with no family. But inside the mansion, none of that mattered. Tasha kept studying, kept learning, and kept growing. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Tasha looked at him with wide, thoughtful eyes. "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied. "Why did you help me? You didn't know me. You could have turned me away like others did. Why me?" The question hung in the air. Mr. Donovan thought for a moment before answering. "Because sometimes, life gives us a choice. When you stood at my door, I had a choice to see you as a problem, or to see you as a person. I chose to see you as a person who deserved a chance. And I'm glad I did. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe fully that she mattered. But the road was not completely smooth. As months passed, challenges appeared. Some children at school teased her for her background. Once, she came home with tears in her eyes, hiding her face. Mr. Donovan noticed and asked gently, "What happened?" "They say I don't belong," she whispered. "They say I'm different." He leaned forward, his voice steady and calm. "Different does not mean less. It means you have a story they cannot understand. One day, the same story that makes you feel small will be the story that makes you great." His words stayed with her, giving her strength. Slowly, she learned to ignore the whispers and focus on her dreams. And those dreams began to grow. Tasha didn't just want to pass her classes. She wanted to excel. She wanted to prove that where you start in life doesn't have to decide where you end. At the mansion, she continued to learn beyond her schoolwork. Mr. Donovan taught her about discipline, kindness, and responsibility. He gave her small tasks, like organizing books, writing letters, or helping plan events. With each task, her confidence grew. The breakthrough moment came one evening when Mr. Donovan hosted a small gathering at his home. Business partners, friends, and local leaders were present. Among them, whispers about Tasha could be heard again. Some wondered if she would stay hidden. But to their surprise, Mr. Donovan invited her to join. She entered the room nervously, dressed neatly in a simple dress. People turned to look at her, expecting a shy child. Instead, she greeted them politely, introduced herself, and even spoke about her studies. The room fell silent, impressed by her poise. In that moment, even the most doubtful guests realized she was not just a child rescued by chance, she was a child with a future. And the man who had once shocked everyone by letting her in from the cold was now proving that compassion could build something stronger than wealth alone. That night, as the guests left, several of them quietly told Mr. Donovan that they admired what he was doing. The same people who had once questioned him were now beginning to understand. Tasha went to bed that evening with a heart full of hope. She still remembered the night she had knocked on the door asking for a place in the doghouse. But now, she was no longer that lost, desperate girl. She was a student, a learner, and a dreamer. And though she didn't know exactly what the future held, she knew one thing for certain: her life had changed forever. Years passed, and the mansion that once stood as a symbol of wealth alone slowly became known for something greater. It became known as the place where a little girl's life had been rewritten. Tasha grew, not just in age but in strength, knowledge, and confidence. The girl who had once begged for a place in a doghouse was now standing tall, her eyes filled with hope for the future. Each morning, she woke up early, put on her school uniform, and prepared for the day. She was no longer the shy child who hesitated to speak. She had found her voice, her rhythm, and her dreams. At school, she began to rise above the challenges that had once weighed her down. Teachers noticed her determination, classmates slowly began to respect her, and even those who had teased her before saw her resilience and grew silent. Mr. Donovan watched her journey with quiet pride. He had seen many successes in his life: business deals, awards, recognition, but nothing compared to watching a child flourish because he had chosen kindness. There were nights when he sat by the fire, remembering the first evening he had opened his door to her. He would smile to himself, realizing how much that one small choice had changed not just her life, but his own. Tasha often thought back to that night too. It never left her memory: the cold wind, the shivering in her thin jacket, the courage it had taken to knock, and the fear that she might be turned away. Sometimes, when she lay in her warm bed, she whispered to herself, "If I had walked past that house, my life would be so different." She carried gratitude in her heart like a flame that never went out. As the years went on, she didn't just focus on her studies. She began to take part in school plays, reading competitions, and even small leadership roles in class. She wanted to prove that she wasn't defined by her past. Every time she stood on a stage or raised her hand to answer a question, she felt stronger. She was no longer invisible. Mr. Donovan encouraged her at every step. When she struggled with math, he found her a tutor. When she showed interest in writing, he filled the library with books that would inspire her. When she doubted herself, he reminded her of the courage she had shown the very first night they met. "If you could knock on my door that night," he would say, "then there is nothing in this world you cannot do." The community eventually learned the full story. At first, people were shocked. A millionaire taking in a girl from the streets was not something they had ever heard of. Some doubted his intentions, others questioned his judgment. But as they saw Tasha grow, their doubts turned into admiration. Parents pointed her out to their children, saying, "Look at her. She's proof that with courage and kindness, lives can change." Tasha herself remained humble. She never forgot where she came from. Whenever she saw children sitting on sidewalks or families struggling to carry groceries, she would stop to help. Sometimes she would share her school snacks with younger kids in the neighborhood who had none. She didn't do it for attention. She did it because she knew exactly how it felt to be in their place. One afternoon, years after that cold night, Tasha was invited to speak at her school assembly. She stood before hundreds of students, her heart beating fast. For a moment, she remembered the girl she used to be, the one who hid her face, the one who was too afraid to ask for anything more than a corner to sleep. But then she lifted her head and spoke clearly. "I once thought I was invisible," she began. "I thought no one would ever see me or hear me. I was a little girl who only wanted a safe place to sleep. I didn't dream of big things because I didn't think they were for me. But one night, someone opened a door. That door gave me more than shelter. It gave me hope. And now, I want you all to remember you are never invisible. You are never less. Your story matters." The hall filled with applause. Some students had tears in their eyes. Teachers looked at her with pride. And Mr. Donovan, who sat quietly at the back, felt a warmth in his heart that no business achievement had ever given him. As she grew older, Tasha began to dream even bigger. She wanted to study further, to build a life where she could give back to others. She often told Mr. Donovan, "One day, I want to do for others what you did for me. I want to be the reason someone believes in themselves again." He always replied with a gentle smile, "You already are, Tasha. You already are." Her journey became known beyond the school and the neighborhood. Local newspapers wrote about her story. Reporters highlighted the unusual but beautiful choice Mr. Donovan had made that night. The story inspired many to open their hearts and homes, not with grand gestures, but with simple acts of kindness. But for Tasha, the most important thing was not the recognition. It was the quiet moments, reading in the library, sitting at the dinner table with laughter, walking into school with books in her hand. These ordinary moments were the treasures she had once thought she would never have. Years later, when she was old enough, she visited the old neighborhood where she had once wandered the streets alone. She saw the same broken houses, the same cracked sidewalks, and the same struggling families. She stopped at the corner where she used to rest, pulling her jacket tight around her shoulders. For a long time, she stood there silently, remembering the girl she had been. Then she whispered to herself, "I made it out. And I will help others make it too." She returned to the mansion, now her home, with a renewed sense of purpose. The bond between her and Mr. Donovan had grown beyond what anyone had expected. They were not connected by blood, but by something stronger: choice, compassion, and trust. The night she had asked to sleep in a doghouse had changed two lives at once. For her, it was the beginning of hope. For him, it was the reminder that true wealth is not measured in money or possessions, but in the lives we touch and the hearts we change. In the years to come, Tasha's story continued to inspire. She went on to achieve things she had once believed were impossible. But no matter how far she went, she never forgot the cold night when she knocked on a door, and the man who had every reason to turn her away instead chose to welcome her in. And whenever people asked Mr. Donovan why he had done it, why he had let a little girl from the streets into his home, he always gave the same answer. Because kindness is the best investment. And because she asked only for a doghouse, but she deserved a palace. The story of that night spread, not as gossip but as a lesson. A lesson that sometimes the smallest requests can reveal the greatest needs. A lesson that one open door can change a lifetime. And a lesson that when compassion meets courage, miracles happen. Tasha's life was no longer defined by poverty or loneliness. It was defined by resilience, learning, and love. And as she looked ahead to the future, she carried with her the promise that she would continue the cycle, opening doors for others, just as one had been opened for her.